What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Jay Pettry, my colleague over on Sherdog.com, for the very first time on the Sheehan Show to talk a little bit of MMA, some fights, some outside of the cage stuff, and all that. Jay, how are you? We had a little bit of a chat about it on Twitter there the other day after the Arm Bronstetter podcast, so I'm delighted to get you on. How are things today?
I can't tell you how excited and pleased I am to be joining the show. I mean, I have to paraphrase my friend who doesn't follow me on Twitter, Aaron Bronstetter. There is nothing like being on the Sherdog Show with Sean Sherdog on Sheehan.com. Yeah. I am just pleased as punch to be joining you here.
I love it. I always get the you're working for Sherdog now. You know all about Fight Finder. Can you fix my record? I'll ask you more about that later on. But I feel like I have a real Sherdog person on here, apart from me, who's just kind of like hanging on in the background. Because we'll talk more about that later. Let's talk about UFC 313 first. And it's very interesting. I did the Severe May podcast the other day, and we talked about the decision and who we thought won and everything. And then at the end of it, I was like, I have to throw on the addendum here that I also feel like it's a bit sad that Alex Pereira is no longer champion, because it felt like he was not necessarily our last star, but maybe like the only active star at the moment. Obviously with McGregor kind of not very inactive, and John Jones somewhat inactive as well. And then you sent me, we were talking just beforehand to break the fourth wall a little bit about topics we talk about, and you mentioned the mourning of Alex Pereira, which I thought was very, very interesting, because we were thinking about the same things kind of at the same time. Talk to us a little bit about that, and I hate when people say talk to us, but anyway, the mourning of Alex Pereira. When you said that, what did you mean? How do you feel about Alex Pereira after that loss?
So one of the many million things I do with Sherdog is monitor and take care of the Sherdog forums. I've been a part of the forums for over 20 years now, which is shocking that I made an account back in 2002 as a high schooler, talking smack and getting banned, of course, and coming back, and now I run it. But that's neither here nor there. The pulse, the community feeling as a whole, at least as the forums speak for, was a sense of dread, a sense of disappointment, and it wasn't quite like an historic example of Fedor tapping out to Verdum and breaking the Sherdog forums for about an hour or so. It was a kind of a morose, just like as if a death in the family, as if a friend had moved away kind of feeling, where it feels like this was almost the end, where Pereira, when he was knocked out by Adesanya in the rematch, people were still bullish on him. Okay, fine. That's going to happen. Oh no, he lost once to Izzy after beating him how many times? And it was kind of one of those, it comes with the territory kind of reactions. Whereas this felt different. This is the way that Ankalaev defeated Pereira. So, it was a close fight, but it was the kind of replicable fight and strategy that fight fans were thinking, oh no, there's nothing. If they rematch, then nothing's going to happen, and Pereira is kind of done. Our hero is gone. And that is a fascinating dynamic that, if you really think about it, in the top tier of like pay-per-view sellers, if we had to coin those names are by and large gone. We have Islam Makhachev or Ilya Topuria are the two, I would guess, if you had to plunk a International Fight Week headliner type of fight, that might be it. But am I also missing something? Am I getting dragged down too, or is this kind of, it felt like an era shift, like the opposite of Welcome to the Machida era, kind of here we go. Let's slog through this for a while.
I didn't feel that myself, but I did kind of see what you saw in the reaction to it, because even some, my guy Robbie Fox over on Barstool, he laid out the champions, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. Like, you have the heavyweight division could be amazing, obviously, if those two lads fight, right? And then you've Ankalaev, which I don't want to be that disrespectful to him either, but we'll be disrespectful for a second, right? You've Ankalaev. Then you have Duplessis, who's actually probably a pretty underratedly entertaining fighter, but still people don't look at him that way. Belal, people hate Belal, let's be honest. And then you have Makhachev, who is a brilliant fighter, but does he excite people? And he fights, once or twice a year. We don't have a champion at 145, and in the lower, the 135 and 125, it feels like people are very hard up on them. And plus, the women's divisions, like, it was such a terrible year for the women's divisions. I do think there are stars there and there are exciting fighters, but with Amanda Nunes coming to the end of her career, with Shevchenko kind of coming to the end of her career as well, and I think Kayla Harrison a little bit has kind of been outed as maybe not as good a fighter as we thought of over the last while. I do think there has been that struggle. Let me throw this at you, though. I don't know if you're like a massive fan of all other sports and things, but I have a kind of a theory that all sports are losing stars, and there's a lot. It's easier to make way easier now to make short-term stars, but to make long-term stars, it's way harder. Like, I asked my colleague Ian the other day, can he name another tennis player apart from like the big guys? I'm like, I can't. Like, and I think most people couldn't. Like, you could go through a whole litany of other sports, like, and apart from maybe, obviously soccer around the world and probably NFL, but like, I couldn't name you a hockey player now. Like, and there's things like that. I just wonder, are sports starts dwindling? Like, I think boxing, like, I know a lot of people who love boxing think like, oh, Terence Crawford is like this massive star. I guarantee you the vast majority of even sports fans couldn't pick out a Terence Crawford or a Gervonta Davis. They know Floyd Mayweather, they know Manny Pacquiao, they know Mike Tyson, but they don't know them. I think MMA is a little bit different because the thing I mentioned earlier, to be built on the short term, the short clips, the TikToks. We can always have a Ronda Rousey. We can always have an Alex Pereira with his quick knockouts or things like that. I think, okay, just to throw it back to you, does MMA have an advantage with star making with short term? Because we can also make long term stars, just whether you get a Canada behind them or Ireland behind them, or they have 5 or 6 quick knockouts or submissions in a row. Do you think MMA is kind of, we will replicate that, whereas other sports maybe won't?
Well, I think that combat sports, by and large, have the advantage of being able to craft the individual star because the outcomes are solely reflective on that individual's performance.
Correct.
Whereas most others, tennis, of course, is a 1v1 experience most of the time. But it's the UFC tried to be mainstream and push that and have the stars to be able to bolster that. I mean, just the silly examples of the UFC wheeling up to to New York to ring the stock bell and everything like that. That type of the Wheaties boxes, that has fallen by the wayside for our sport, I would say, and for boxing as well. I wonder if promoters are losing their interest in crafting stars. Not as much as because people think, oh, they're not promoting these fighters well. The UFC is $1 billion enterprise, has built countless stars and fighters and all of the events and everything like that. They know what they're doing. At the end of the day, they have to. They've survived just by the sheer notion of that they've kept going when so many other organizations are defunct, means they have to know what they're doing. So that points to me that it's an intentional non-push. Like, you have fighters out there that are doing remarkable things in the lower tier that no person in the public would anybody, if you passed 50 people on the street and asked them about Steve Garcia in the UFC, this many people would have heard of them,
including me.
And that's kind of and obviously not a star, but what he's been doing is very impressive lately. Team sports have the luxury of having the team brand name be able to push, and you can get behind the tribalism that is the team, where that goes the same for football as well, and plenty of other sports where you have the team as, I'm a lifelong Man U fan or Arsenal fan or whatever it may be. Where if you have here, you can't really be a lifelong Frank Mir fan. Just for example, I'm glad he's recovering from his emergency surgery, but just to use him as an example in the news, that star-making magic, I feel like, is kind of a product of a bygone era where the UFC especially wants to be the star, where at any given event, at any given time, the UFC can trot into Omaha, Nebraska and say, we're putting on a card. They don't have to say who's on it, and it will sell halfway out. That's what the UFC wants. That's what those organizations want. That's what the TKO boxing is going to want when they build. They don't want to have the fractured. They don't want to have it leading by a star. They want that. So I think it's partly an era, we're kind of moving on past that. I think it's also kind of an intentional, we as an organization don't want anybody like that, because I feel like the UFC, for some reason, felt like it got burned when Conor McGregor went to go boxing, despite how much money the UFC made, so much more on allowing Conor McGregor to box and taking a piece of that pie than they would have had he headlined against fill in the blank.
I want to talk more about that fight in a second. I want to talk about the judging as well, especially. But let's move on a little bit, because I want to stay on this topic and talk about stars. And let's do that by talking about UFC 314. And UFC 314 goes down April 12th over in Miami. You can catch all the action on ESPN+. It's an amazing card. Alexander Volkanovski attempting to recapture his featherweight title when he takes on Diego Lopes. One of the biggest rising stars of the sport, Paddy Pimblett, takes on former Bellator champion Michael Chandler, and we've so much more on that card as well. Tune in, ESPN+, Saturday night, April 12th, for all the action. ESPN+ is where you can catch all of that. Paddy Pimblett is one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of stars. Is he breaking the mold of what we were just talking about in terms of stars, in terms of people being able to make themselves stars, or the UFC make them stars? Because he has a bit of everything. He has a bit of the TikTok clips. He has the bit of the fighting. He has a bit of the I won't say the country behind it, but he has Liverpool behind him. And you spoke about soccer a minute ago, and if there is, even though I hate him, if there is a fervent fan base, Liverpool are probably the most fervent of all worldwide. You could say that. What is your take on Paddy? Because I'm a bit weird with Paddy, because I have covered Paddy from day dot, when he was a young guy, and I know everything about Paddy. But I think it's very interesting for people who, you obviously knew Paddy and were following him through Cage Warriors, but are really concentrating on him now. What's your take on Paddy Pimblett, and especially this fight against Michael Chandler? And I'll say one more thing before I throw it over to you. Everyone who I've spoken to so far is picking Michael Chandler, and I'm not the biggest Paddy believer in the world. Let me be honest, but I'm a bit shocked by that. A little bit shocked. Are you?
I'm not shocked, because I think Paddy's going to have that divisive nature to him, where every fight that he engages in from now until the end, because of how he's built himself, because how he carries himself, there will be a fervent 40% of the fans that will pick against him. He's going to lose because he's going to lose. And it doesn't necessarily have to be based on reason or a stylistic matchup, but he's going to lose because of course he's going to lose. He needs to lose or something like that. He has done an excellent job in spite of the UFC. He has really put on a persona, had entertaining enough fights. Excuse me for a second. He has made sure to be I don't want to say controversial figure, because he's no, Bryce Mitchell or any of those other knuckleheads we have in the sport, but he presents himself in a way that almost draws in detractors. They go, oh, that goofy Muppet and the hair. They for some reason, there's this fundamental reason that people go, I don't agree with what he is. They don't know the guy from Adam. They know him as a fighter who has a funny haircut and dances at the end of fights, and he says a couple funny things, and he has a silly accent. That's all they know about him. That's all they want to know about him. and they were able to make the decision accordingly. And that works. That he actually, it's not, and he's not stumbling into fandom because his results speak for themselves. He's winning the fights that, to be honest, I picked against him in many of these fights. I looked at the Jared Gordon fight ahead of time and I went, okay, I see what he brings to the table, but I think that Jared Gordon's going to keep it on the feet, blah, 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 blah. Result notwithstanding, the judges awarded him the decision. So he's keeping moving up the ladder. And it's too bad because could you imagine 10 years ago, the type of shorts that he would have worn, like back in the, maybe more than 10 years ago, actually, before the Rebco deal, the flames of the shorts, the ice, all any of those cool things that we had in the past, the flashy person, the personality, that's when he is a fighter that grew up watching that. You can tell that he wanted to present that. He didn't, it's not the pro wrestling style gimmick that some other fighters bring up to the table and try and play the heel. I believe him when he gets out and says some dumb thing or funny thing or goofy thing or silly or whatever. I just think that's Paddy. And I think that's kind of something that is fresh when you compare him to fighters that try and be popular and try and say buzzwords and, try and force something like Colby Covington type. So he's an interesting personality. I think he's going to get knocked out, but that's also a tough thing to say because he's never been knocked out before. But maybe is that just because of my hope that Michael Chandler is going to succeed? Well, I don't care. He's a Bellator guy that's done extremely well in the UFC with a record of 2-4 in the Octagon? He has exceeded his expectations somehow. 314 is 314 is a card that's made for us. Yes. You and I, the folks that are on the forums. It's not made for 100 or a million pay-per-view buys. And I appreciate that, for one.
Me too. I love cards like that. And I think this fight is so interesting. What you said there about Paddy is so right. Like, love him or hate him, Paddy Pimblett is authentic. He is himself. He is true to himself. He is true to his gym. He is true to his city. And I don't know if you watch his video blogs or not, but they're the best in MMA. Because it's just him and him sitting on the couch, rubbing his dog's head, farting, watching the fights. It's all it is just. He is. I think Chuck Liddell was his favorite fighter coming up. He is from our era type of thing. I think, even though maybe he's a little bit younger, but I think this fight is fascinating in a couple of different ways because if you look at Paddy's last 3 times, one of them was very early in his career to Cameron Nelson. He got submitted, and then he got basically wrestled in the 2 other fights. But everyone looks at Paddy, and I think because of the striking deficiencies that he has showed, even myself have said this, look, if he comes in against a very good striker, he's going to get knocked out. But Paddy's improved a whole lot in his last 2 to 3 fights, but offensively and defensively. My thing is when he's fighting Michael Chandler, would Michael Chandler think about wrestling him? But the exact point you made there is why that probably won't happen. Because when Michael Chandler signed for the UFC, he decided, I no longer want to be the guy when I'm in a taxi, when someone asks me what I do and I tell them I'm a fighter and they say, oh, are you in the UFC? That is what Michael Chandler is fighting for now. Michael Chandler's not fighting for gold. He's not fighting for wins. He's fighting to be the exciting guy who's known to be in the UFC. And against Paddy Pimblett, that might be a tough way to get a win. So let's see how that goes. Just to talk about quickly about the Lopes and Volkanovski fight, I think this is so fascinating because for Volkanovski, right, you look at him and he got knocked out, against Topuria. He got knocked out against Makhachev. But this might be a crazy thing to say when he's lost his last 2 fights by knockout in a row. I don't think he's the type of guy who should be going in planning to finish type of thing, especially when you're Diego Lopes. And looking at Diego Lopes' record here on the beautiful website that is Sherdog.com, he's 26 wins and 22 of them via knockout. And let me say as well, I absolutely love the Sherdog layout because you can see that so easily, and it's the best. Not to blow our own fucking whatever here, but I absolutely love it. But it just that by looking at the front page, it just tells you everything, and that's what fascinates me in this fight because I honestly, I've never been massively blown away by Diego Lopes. Like, I've never thought, oh, he's going to be a champion or anything like that. But now with the Poirier gone away, now with Volkanovski in a place in his career where we're like, is he still the guy? I think Diego Lopes has a massive chance here. But what I would say as well is I believe in Alexander Volkanovski. I believe he is one of the best fighters of a generation. It's very odd that you hear me saying someone is nearly as good as Demetrius Johnson. And I said that about him at one stage. So I'm not ready to totally go against Volkanovski. What's your thoughts on that fight? Because I am fascinated by it.
You've beaten Max Holloway 3 times, uncontroversially. Maybe, okay, fine, the second one's close.
Them, yeah.
I might have personally scored it for Holloway, but a 48-47 either way. Of course, that fight was ultra close. That alone puts you in a pantheon of, I don't know, Dustin Poirier. You know, there just aren't people like that, just in terms of the Max win. And of course, all the other achievements he's had. He has put himself in the miraculous, awkward iron triangle that is the best 3 featherweights in the world of Aldo and Holloway and Volkanovski. So I can never count him out. But there's the but. Historical statistics, all of the above. I was racking my brain. I didn't stop and do the whole work because I realized it would take me about 4 hours to get through it, to look up all of the champions that have competed for a title coming off of a loss or multiple losses. I cannot think of examples where multiple losses preceding the title shot and that they go on to break their skid winning the title. I can't think of things like that. Instead, I think of people like John Lober, way back in the day, yes, he beat Frank Shamrock in the 90s. And then he went on to lose a bunch of fights or fight to a draw, and it's like 5 in a row or something like that. Because he had beaten Frank Shamrock, the UFC slotted him into a title fight. What happened? Of course, he lost to Frank Shamrock. The examples of Eilers and Arlovskis and all of the above for years. If you want to get current, Aldo fighting for the title after he had lost prior to retirement, coming back. So many names. Holly Holm losing a couple times and fighting Duran Duran to me. Just fighters coming off losses and fighting for a belt has never felt right to me as a purist. As from the martial arts standpoint, from the merit-based standpoint, that doesn't exist in the current era. And to be fair, I don't know if it ever really existed. It was all just part of our imaginations. We kind of hoped that the UFC would run him there. But, you think of even fighters coming off losses that came to win the next fight, like Shogun, when he lost to Machida the first time and then knocked him out the rematch. There's so few examples of that happening. And the game is so built on momentum and confidence and every fan watches is what have you done for me lately? So he's going to be up a creek there. I think he's got a great stylistic matchup in Lopes, who is going to throw himself at Volkanovski like all 8 or 9 of his limbs, depending on if he tries to, use headbutts. I'm kidding, of course. Just attacks wildly and aggressively. I too very much like the finish rate of Lopes is really important, not just because of that he can knock people out, but because he also can decide, this isn't working out for me. Let me go hit an armbar on Gavin Tucker. I got this. I can just quickly do this. And don't worry about it. Only take 90 seconds. I'll go home and clock out. He's aggressive to a fault, and that's going to work against him eventually, and very possibly Volkanovski. But you know what? I'm excited to see it. But I'm not as excited I get why they made this fight. 314 needed a headliner with a name. I get why Volkanovski gets the spot. But my gosh, Movsar Evloev is the new Bilal Muhammad now. I mean, what's he got to do? He's the new Merab. What's he got to do what's that man got to do? I mean, finish the fight, yes, I guess, but what do you think that they're going to slot Movsar in it after this one? What do you think they're going to do with that?
I think if Patricio beats Yair, I'd say he could be jumping past.
I think he's going to skip him too. You're exactly right.
Well, let's see what happens. I think the thing about Evloev as well, when Topuria was champion, I was like, I really don't have much interest in seeing Evloev because I don't think he can beat him. Now, I said the same thing about Bilal with Leon, so maybe I'm wrong on that as well. But now the fact that Topuria isn't champion, I think it changes it changes everything for everyone. Let's move on a little bit. We're going to blow past our half an hour here, so let's move this to 45 minutes, maybe, or an hour, maybe. Let's talk about judging. Because can I fight at the weekend? Like, even though we talked about the Mourning of Alex Pereira and everything, I still think Pereira did win that fight, to be honest, going by the system we have. I want two things from you here. I want how you saw that going, but also I saw you've done the judges course and the refereeing course, haven't you? And you had a tweet this weekend about judging, and which I was intrigued by, about how people are trying to change results and all of that. And maybe we'll talk more about that in Fight Finder in a second, but to be honest here, I'm throwing this out and I'm just going to say, what are your thoughts on judging? Because at the moment, I'm kind of on a fact-finding mission, asking loads of people in MMA what they think about judging, and then just kind of half ignoring and going, no, go away. So, what are your thoughts on MMA judging as we speak in 2025?
Well, you know what I think judging needs? I think it needs open score. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I know you have discussed this to the ends of the earth. I did, at the time, I did score the fight for Ankalaev, knowing full well that the third round could be, anybody could have won that round. Yeah, I mean, gosh, it was so close that Mark Goddard could have won that round. It was just exciting, and I'm just kidding. It was what it was. And I think in terms of judging itself, on a whole, in the major circuits, we're not going to talk about lower regional scene because I do have some thoughts on that. It's fine. And why is it fine? Think of how many fights that carry on in the UFC every week. There's a dozen. We average a dozen. Obviously, the last two cards have had 10 apiece, but a dozen fights a week, and maybe every other week we have a controversial something. That's 5% that we would disagree about. Napkin math, of course. It's not a huge confusion of how we're doing this. And judges, like referees, are in the interminable position where the praise will basically never be ushered to them. It's if they get it right, well, good. They should get it right. That's what they're paid millions of dollars to do.
Hundreds.
Obviously, look up judging salaries. It's not nearly as lucrative of a career as one might think. It's people have such opinions. They get a result or a name stuck in their craw, and they will repeat that narrative of Keith Peterson and the cigarettes and Sal D'Amato curses. And then you actually stop and if you're an insane person like me or you or Scott Fontana, we will look and go, well, actually, hang on a second. Sal D'Amato judges thousands of fights, hundreds of fights a year, and you have an issue with 3 of them. That I'm okay with that, considering how close MMA can be. It blows up when there's an issue, and what I feel like has really amplified the issue the last couple of years, it's sports betting. 100%. Because more and more people have a personal stake in the fights, and they blame everybody else other than themselves, which of course, you and I are author and put together betting content, and people are sometimes mad at us when we miss something, even though, okay, fine. I wrote up a piece about Alex Pereira winning the fight because of the betting odds and the way it was presented. How am I supposed to know that, yes, while I said his main weapon would be the leg kick, his only weapon would be the leg kick? Who would have thought? That's never happened before. So the fans and the incoming fans trying to make a buck. The ones that are the Fred Flintstone type that want to just throw down anything and try and throw $500,000. Yes, Drake, you idiot. You're bet on an underdog that's 4-1 for a reason, and then they get smoked. What are you gonna do? Yes, you're the curse. Judging's fine. I appreciate that in America, and it's like this in some other countries, judges are required and referees are required to be trained and retrained and retrained. This is not something that you can take a weekend course and then be done and then you're moving on. It's like being an attorney. You have to keep up with your studies. We call them CLEs for us, or the continuing legal education for attorneys, where you keep on going to classes and keeping up with the latest trends and whatnot. Judges have to do, and refs have to do that too. When I enrolled in the judging course at the Association of Boxing Commissions conference a couple years ago in Niagara Falls, New York, most of the main referees in the sport were there, taking the courses. The judges too. Sal Diamata was one of my judging teachers, and he went on to work with the advanced judging course, because there's a beginner and advanced courses. These people are trained as best as they can, make a pittance of money doing so. Yes, of course, we kind of take issue, we the community take issue with a lack of accountability or transparency sometimes, but that is to the commission or the ABC occasionally, if there's, depending on the communication. There's a lot of overblown drama and fuss and angst about the judges. But if we didn't, I'll give you an example. If we didn't have Sal Diamata judging the majority of all the fights that happen in the UFC, you don't want to know what would happen if we had to start slotting in regional guys that are regional guys and gals that, yes, they need reps, but how many times do we go to Texas and see a regional person on the prelims and go, have they seen a fight before?
Do you know where you see it an awful lot? You see it an awful lot when there is a UFC card on the same weekend as a PFL card, and let's say maybe a Cage Warriors card as well. And the UFC has the top judges. Maybe Ben Cartledge and David Leatherby are over doing the Cage Warriors card, and PFL has random judge number 7, and we see issues. That's where we've seen the worst decisions over the last while. So I 100% agree with you on that. And I think the thing, like I speak to judges daily. I speak to 2 of them today, funnily enough. And like the one thing they always say to me is, people are never going to agree, but it's about understanding. But like, I'll be honest, I even see it myself sometimes with betting. And your point about betting is so true. Like, it's hard for someone, who lost £100 on a fight to be understanding about it, And I was looking through my bets there, and in the last 2 weeks, I had Amalbayev, and that, the referee in madness. I had, what was the other one from last week? There was another controversial decision, and I had Pereira this week, and then I had the Angela Hill fight 2 weeks before that. So I'm like, hey, what are these terrible judges and referees? And also, I'm as bad as I can be as bad as someone, but I can understand it from the bettor's point of view as well. But the bettor's point of view are not not a reliable person on this. They're reliable on the betting side, but they're not reliable on the judging side. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about Fight Finder, because I'm fascinated by Fight Finder, because you jump on Sherdog. There's a great event this weekend. So, St. Paddy's Bash or something, I think it's called this weekend, to have all of those, and then have the UFC and Cage Warriors and KSW, or no, St. Paddy's something. Anyway, how crazy is it to keep hold of all of that, and keep all of those going, and keep all of those up to date and correct, and also to keep not just that, but to keep on top of all these people who are sending in records like, I'm Sean Sheehan, I'm 25-1, everything. It must be fun but stressful at the same time.
It is always interesting, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I switched away from law for the time being, because this industry will always keep me guessing. It's always something new. It's always something unusual and interesting that makes me think and makes me go, okay, this isn't the same thing. and you run into this, and then you try and keeping track of all the events that happen, it would be impossible for a single person. And you try and you just drown. And at one point, I would consume, countless hours and hours and hours of content from all of these organizations, regional and major. And it was just an absolute, just a kind of a brain melt. While yes, I work on Fight Finder, have a crew of about 40 to 45, depending on the weather, international staff members that are the real MVPs, so to speak, when it comes to this. Because I can only do so much as an editor, as somebody who runs play-by-plays and everything like that. We have various branches. We have a Europe team, we have an Asia team, we have a Brazil team, a South America team. We're trying to include some other territories. Maybe India might be getting something soon. It's massive. The sport is back in terms of regional mixed martial arts, because there was a time when the pandemic hit, regional MMA dwindled to a fraction of what it once was, and for good reason. If these organizers are barely making any money putting on these shows, when they have to go through more expenses and jump through more hoops to be able to run them, just won't run them. And organizations shuttered by a tremendous amount. They're coming back now, and that's great. So we can have the St. Patty's Showdown in Nebraska, United States, because of course that's where obviously the St. Patty's Showdown should take place. We can have all of our organizations, National Fighting, one doing their things. We can also have Tough Enough in Las Vegas, adding professional fights to their roster. So it's fascinating. It's always interesting. And are there any questions for me you have about it?
Yeah, I want to ask you more inside MMA type of one. So over the last while, there has been this, I suppose, debate about what fights are real and what fights aren't. There was one recently with Dennis Frimpong, who actually fought an octagon in a very real fight at the weekend, but he's an Irish fighter who's training over in the UK at the moment, and he fought a guy who basically was like, if I showed up to fight, and he just beat the living shit out of him. And there is one side of the argument that says that shouldn't be counted because it's not a real competitive fight, and then there's the other side of the argument, and I'll be honest, I kind of fall at this side. It's like if Manchester United played the Dog and Duck and it was in the FA Cup and it's a competitive matchup, if they win 15-0, it's still a 15-0 win, and I think it should be counted. Where do you fall on that? Where does Sherdog fall on that? Is that something that's been a discussion with the people in charge over the last time? And just to reiterate again, I am not involved in any of these conversations, so I haven't a clue, but you're the bad to ask, I suppose.
It is a discussion that we've been having more recently than usual. I don't want to dump or harp or anything on any of our competitors. One of the things that, for example, Tapology will do is they will flag events not hard fought or competitive to international standards. That's one of their criteria that they have adopted to rule out fights like that, where Frimpong fights a bartender and who just falls down. And that's something we've been dealing with actually in the Middle East of a lot of places, where these organizations will crop up, hold events where you'll look at the results sheet, which is just an Excel sheet that has the fighter columns of winner, loser, how they won, how they lost. Very simple. Where we will see all of the winners already have Fight Finder profiles, and all of the losers are making their professional debuts, and they all lost, and all of these people won. And you look and go, oh, okay, an 8-second knockout. Let's see how that played out. And then you see a guy who gets hit in the bottom of the jaw, clutches his forehead and falls down, and you go, well, hold on a second, there's something funny here. So it has become a case-by-case situation, where case-by-case, where we're looking at the actual fight footage and make a determination of whether it's a dive. And that is a really slippery slope. It is a very dangerous territory. We don't like traversing it, because who am I? I'm sure, fine. I'm trained. I've had martial arts experience for much of my life. I've never taken a professional or amateur mixed martial arts fight. Who the hell am I to say that this fight over in Slovakia wasn't legitimate, because it doesn't look like it was legitimate. It looks like a guy took a dive. But then common sense kind of kicks in. You go, okay, that's not how this works. That's not how fighting works. And you know, you sometimes like obscenity. You know when you see it. It almost like checks the box, and you go, that's not okay. There was a woman with a terrific name over in Russia, Sabrina Van Dam. I don't think her actual surname was Van Dam. I think it was adopted for personality and social media purposes. And she gets in there and absolutely mollywops this poor girl in about 14 seconds, head kicks her in the shoulder, falls down, clutching her ribs. Just absolutely terrific acting. 10 out of 10, no notes. And so we had to look at that and go, we can't. At some point, you have to draw the line. And where the line is not a actual flat iron line. It's a, oh, this isn't good. Oh, that's okay. It's not good. We always want to err on the side of caution, because I don't want to try and be the arbiter of legitimacy. Nobody wants that power, because that's a danger. It's a dangerous tool to say, hey, this event was shady looking, and therefore it can't count. Well, what happens to all the fighters that put their honest time into it, expecting a real fight, only to find out they're fighting the local gym teacher who doesn't like getting punched in the face, and shows this by not liking getting punched in the face and falling down? It hurts me sometimes, to me as one of the decision makers on Fight Finder, to have to rule in a certain way, because these are some of these people, it's their job, it's their money they're relying on, and we as the Fight Finder people have to man a gate that makes it so it's fair. And I think that's where I try and weigh in on it, that it's a fair result, it's a fair decision. It's not something we come to by ourselves, and it's miraculous the things that are happening in MMA these days, trying to pass off as legitimate.
I suppose we all remember. Remind me, Askar Mavsarov, wasn't that the?
That's our boy.
He's the boy. I was reading through some of the fight, the FF files, as you call them. Do you know the one? This is probably, everyone disagrees with me on this, but the John Jones one is one of my favorites, because, like, if we're looking at it from that point of view, the last question I asked you, the way you answer it, that John Jones result has to stay. Like, that, fair enough, you might have disagreed with it at the time or whatever, but, like, you got disqualified in the Matt Hamill fight I'm talking about. Got disqualified in the fight. The fight's happened. It's gone through. Look, was it unfortunate? Was John Jones about to win the fight? Yes, but he threw illegal strikes at the time. They were illegal at the time. Lots of things have changed in mixed martial arts compared to years ago. I'm sure there's some wins via headbutt on Sherdog, aren't there?
Can confirm.
Yeah, there you go. So things like that, I think, are fascinating. That's why what the articles that you do and the work that you do is very, very important as well. Just to remind people that, like, this isn't static either. Things can change and it can be different. So, any other kind of quick story for us on Fight Finder, even the Askar one, maybe you want to remind people of, because that was a fascinating one, wasn't it?
So Askar was an interesting tale, tragically not unique. We actually to spin off from Askar Mozarov was a Ukrainian-based fighter who was a powerful kickboxer, about 205 pounds, and crossed over to mixed martial arts and flirted with the sport. This is according to his own manager. Took multiple dives to make money earlier in his career before he started taking it seriously, and then went on to do okay. And what had happened is, over the years, this is way before I was part of Sherdog and anything else, so there's no blame to place on anyone's foot, had worked his way to slide in fights that didn't quite happen, using footage that looked right, and it could pass off as that, but it didn't work out. So he made it to the UFC on some false claims and accomplishments, and his pro record fell from was it 24-6 or 24 and something like that to 15-14. So most of his record, a lot of his wins turned out to be literal fiction, taking like he had some event in Ukraine in an event called Safari, which was named after the building itself. Was the Safari Opera House, I think, or something like that. Oh, wait a second. The Safari Opera House closed 5 years before any of those fights had possibly happened. And it's the only Safari House in Ukraine of period the end. So right off the bat, you can look and go, okay, so did he make a mistake putting location? No. We reached out to people and officials in the area, the Federation in Ukraine. They're like, yeah, no, there's no event on this date. No, it's very simple, flat like that. So he made it to the UFC somehow, fought Alonzo Menafield, got destroyed, and he tested positive for plenty of substances, disappeared. He deleted his Instagram recently, and he claimed that we took his dream away. And that's unfortunate, because if his dream were real, and by real I mean he had done the things that he said he did, then we would have no issue here. There's another fighter who I'll go into very briefly. He is from Kyrgyzstan, and he is, his name is a lot of names, and that's why I'm struggling on it.
James Bond.
Yes. Oh, shoot. His name is Nursultan Kaypnazarov.
Okay.
And it can also be Bektirson and Beksultan, and transliteration, meaning the translation of text into different languages, can get squidgy, especially in the Slavic regions over there. Different letters can mean different things, so it can mean all sorts of things. So over the course of a decade, this guy managed, his nickname was Bad Boy. And the article on FF Files is called Bad Boy, What You're Going to Do, where he had somehow managed to take his losses and put them on fighters like Bektirson and Beksultan Kaypnazar and similar names where he could identify this was a similar name fighter, but not me. Yes, there's many fighters with this name in my country. I am not unusual. And so currently, Bektirson Kaypnazar, that's how he is currently registered on Fight Finder, originally had a record in, like, one time they wrote him as 9-1-1, and he was like 16-2 sometime, and every one of his losses was shoveled off, and somehow he was amassing more. So TLDR, this fighter is currently registered with 10 wins and 27 defeats.
Love it.
Now that's fine. I don't knock a fighter for taking losses. It is how it is. But to actively try and shovel off fights and use pictures of other people to pretend who they are is just a problem. And so we finally tracked that down and figure that out. And this guy is currently riding a 7-fight losing streak because, unfortunately, he's not the fighter he's shaped up to be. So we run into that sometimes on Fight Finder, and it's unfortunate. But if there's a good thing about this, that is the unusual of unusual situations. We don't have many of these crop up because in the digital age that we have now, it's so easy to go, okay, fine. You have a smartphone. Everybody has a smartphone, which means you have video capabilities, which means you can take the video. So there's no excuse anymore, which means a lot of fighters have not done this. So if there is a silver lining to all of this, it is this. Most of the fighters are honest, hardworking people trying to make a living and provide for their families and do good work and honor their teammates and their coaches and themselves and their families. And so if there is that positive, it is these Bektirsons, these Askars, these Nakanos. Don't worry, there's another story coming out soon about a fighter named Nakano who is not real, is the 0.001%. Everybody else
Yeah, there are some honest mistakes as well, though. Like I suppose from even maybe being sitting, because I even remember I've sent you a couple of things that like, oh,
Sure.
that's down as a knockout and it's submission, most of these are like I'm watching for a Cage Warriors prelim or an Octagon prelim or something like that. That this person is their first time ever fighting in a bigger organization or something, and so those things happen as well. And I'm sure it could be like whatever's sent in and all. So it's I think it's all very interesting. It's also like a process and it has to be done. So. I want to ask you about one more thing, Jay, and I appreciate the time. We're 50 minutes in. I love having kind of people from North America on to ask them these questions because I don't really fully understand it sometimes. But like the issues in the UFC at the moment, we were kind of talking about before. Like a bit of it's the matchmaking, and I can talk about that myself because I have I have big issues with the matchmaking at times. But also like the politics. Now, I don't know really anything about American politics, but I see, Donald Trump at the fights, or there's the FBI guy that I have no idea who he is at the fights. And then we have these Tate brother guys. Again, I don't know much about them, but I know that they're not nice guys. And then the Bryce Mitchell stuff over the last while, and then the audacity to bring Bryce Mitchell to a press conference. And then, not to throw a bit of heat at any of the guys in press row, but like John Morgan, I think, was the only guy who asked him a question. And like, that should have been 50 minutes of Bryce Mitchell getting fucking berated with questions, and he didn't. The issues in the UFC, as someone living in that part of the world, is it a thing that's becoming an issue for a lot of people? I know for some it will be an issue and for others it won't, but like it feels like at the moment it's kind of been overtaken. And for Dana White, he's a guy like who said, I don't want politics involved in my sport. I want, when the pandemic goes on, he's like, don't mention it. I want people, this is a break for people. Like, what about people like me who don't like politics? Whether it's fucking, I don't even know who the leader in the other party is. Joe Biden, is he still alive? Him and Trump or whoever. I couldn't give a shit about any of them. I just don't want to see any of it. But I feel like it's unavoidable now with the UFC, and it's like the kind of the cult of personality that has invaded our sport seems like it's not abating anytime soon. What's your take on all of that?
The UFC picked a side, and that's unfortunate because yes, okay, fine. The UFC worked with Donald Trump back in the very beginning days where they couldn't get sanctioned by anywhere, and they brought him into New Jersey. Yes, that is a part of that whole big story is actually true. There's a whole bunch of fluff that doesn't count about Trump's involvement in this and that. Okay, fine. Yeah, he might have signed a check. So, when it comes to politics in the sport, yes, it has always been prevalent. One of my most viral tweets recently, and I'm not a viral person. I don't want to. I want to say my piece and be out with it. I don't have to worry about 200 people yelling at me because they believe different things than me. Was one fighter called, or who was it? Oh yeah, it was Sean Strickland calling Li Jingliang an anti-Asian slur. And I tweeted, what is going on here? What is this where we're going? And the lion's share of the reactions, it weren't like, well, it's fighting. You shouldn't be so sensitive, you soy latte, I don't know, whatever they say. Were the people that were saying it's not new, it's always been like that. I think what has changed in the American landscape is with the advent of social media so prevalent in our lives yes, fine, we had MySpace back then, but it was a very different world. The Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, that kind of thing, where there was the ability suddenly for everybody to voice their opinion on a large platform with an audience of potentially everybody. And that has emboldened individuals that might have kept their thoughts to themselves, as one rational person tends to do, out and just be out with it and be out with their comments, their cruelties, their slights, their anything like that, anything on the list. People have felt, well, if somebody says it on television and he's an important figure or she's an important figure, then I can say it too in the privacy of my own Facebook account or something like that. And that mentality even came up to the fighters who realize I can make money if I pick a camp, and that camp supports me in a way disproportionately to losing the other side. And that has happened in a pretty big way with some figures that you can point to. We know the ones that really dug in their heels. And then, people like one of my friends, Jason Burgos, who used to work at Sherdog, many, many, many moons ago, regularly spoke to Colby Covington, using him an example, who was a delight of a person, just respectful and responsive, and there was a give and take, and there wasn't any posturing, any fronting, any kind of face. It was just a person, as it had always been. And then you see this personality that's forced on everybody. It's a marketing tactic or something. Maybe it's the fighters trying to build their own star with that, because if the UFC has pulled back on that sort of push, it has been trying as an American mixed martial arts fan the last few years, as more and more fighters say more and more objectionable things that would have been flagged many years ago. We think of the jokes that Miguel Torres and Matt Mitrione made that were off color and what have you, and the UFC did something. And you know what happened? There was not a rash of comments about so-and-so topic afterwards. And because the UFC and by extension ESPN, which I thought would have done something, or their parent company Disney, said something, when nobody took action to the Sean Stricklands, to the Bryce Mitchells, saying they're not okay things. Let's be honest. We're humans. We're adults in this room here. You comment section people, if you're mad at me saying that, you need to take a hard look at yourself if you're defending what they're saying. Yes, they have the right to say it, but I have the right to not be okay with it. When there's not even repercussions. I'm not looking for like a punishment or go to your room, but an acknowledgement, other than he's a dumb guy, but you can watch him get knocked out live on pay-per-view. That was a hard day for me.
Just doesn't add up though, does it? Because he has the freedom, as I tweeted before, Bryce Mitchell has the freedom to be a dumb flat earther idiot.
Absolutely.
You have also the freedom to say, I don't want to be in business with this dumb Nazi flat earther idiot. So yeah. It goes both ways. And I think if you're there, like Dana White, I feel like people respected him for those sort of decisions and I'll give you an example of this. He did an interview with Ben Fowlkes last year, and Ben is great. And Ben asked him some hard questions. And Dana answered him really well, and people respected him for that. It was like one of the only interviews he's done recently where people actually were like, oh, right, fair enough. And there is I don't know, there's something wrong with Dana recently. He's not afraid of me. He hates them so much. He thinks he can get nothing from them. When I actually think the opposite is, a media that will hold you to account rather than okay, we all know there's a clickbait, gotcha media out there as well, absolutely, but I don't know, it's gone too far to the other side. I think the UFC always did a good job of saying the things they needed to say about people who stepped out of line. Look, and he did it okay with Bryce Mitchell. At least he released a statement and stuff like that. But it needed to go a step further. But I feel like that's the only time he's made a statement about anything recently, and it's getting out of hand, because it feels like anything goes when you have the Tate brothers there, and they know they'll be fine there. When you have a guy saying what Bryce Mitchell said about Hitler, and he keeps his job. Well, that opens it up to a whole lot of people. And you know what? The worst thing is it probably closes it off to a certain amount of people as well. And that's the tragedy of all of this. This is supposed to be a sport for everyone. And could you say that's the case these days? I don't know if that's the case, to be honest. But
if you and I had said one of the objectionable things publicly, say we posted it on Twitter, we wouldn't have the next day? This job.
Correct.
And rightfully so.
100%.
And it would be the correct decision. And even if the person who had said the thing that I said and accepted that I said it, would have also understood, okay, maybe this isn't the thing that you're supposed to say. Just, it defies description to this point. To where you have the free speech to say what you want, but you don't have the free speech where you're immune to the consequences of the things that you say. And the UFC has provided that. And that's really too bad. Because yeah, I get it. I'm not trying to drive the code of conduct policy, through the fighters, because obviously that has not been a factor lately. But I don't know. I just feel like civility and decency is starting to slip away sometimes when people can get away with that, and then more fighters can say, "Oh, well, I also don't like this type of person." What?
Yeah, that's true. And before the comment section comes at me, Conor McGregor could probably be thrown into that too and thrown out to there. So
he's saying mean things. He doesn't. Okay. The last thing I'll say, Sean, if I could,
please.
These are, to me, largely unforced errors by the fighters. I say they're errors because they're things they should not say to another human, let alone really think by themselves. But fine, you have the right to think what you want. You have the right to say what you want. They shouldn't. If I said that if I said some of these things in the confines of my family, I get smacked in the face because that's such a terrible thing to say. But they're all on the fighter or the person that says it or does it or makes the act or brings the person in. It's on them to not make that decision. So when they make that decision to speak out and say that they want to go fishing with Hitler or invite alleged sex traffickers to the UFC and hug them, be like, "Welcome back, guys," as if you're not just welcoming them to your show, but validating their existence while they're undergoing multiple charges and investigations for things they have already admitted to on camera that I have heard myself. I've heard them say the things and do the things. I've seen the pictures, whatever. Not a judge, a jury, and executioner. It's that these people are saying these things and are comfortable to be able to say them and do them now. And and they're choosing to in their decisions. And I don't know, man. I don't have a good takeaway. I wish people would just cool down a little bit. We don't need to be so hot. And rhetoric is so hot right now.
100%. I just hope Ireland doesn't go that way. It kind of is a little bit, but I think it's mostly people cosplaying Americans. So as long as we can keep that away from
keep us out of there. We don't need to be in the way. We're up bad enough as is.
Right, quick one to end it. In one word, so who wins, John Jones or Tom Aspinall?
The UFC.
What a cop-out that is. What a cop-out. I think John Jones wins anyway.
Oh, I think John Jones is what John Jones did to Stipe and Cyril Gane was tough, that people were surprised that Cyril Gane was so badly beaten. And then you go, oh, wait a second, he's the greatest mixed martial. I think he's still my number 2, but maybe not my number 1 mixed martial arts ever. He has the ability to beat Tom Aspinall, so I'll uncop.
Yeah, I love it. John Jones it is. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Jay, I really appreciate it. I think it's the first ever 1 hour Sheehan show, so we might have to jump back on again and do it in a few weeks' time again. But I appreciate anything coming up you want to tell people about, or anything tell the people where they can find you and where they should find all that good stuff.
Well, first of all, thank you for going along with me. This is a blast. I tend to do that. I tend to blather on sometimes. I'm really pleased to be here. You can find me primarily on Sherdog.com. I tend to be all over the coverage, from news to play-by-play to the Fight Finder, the forums, and everywhere that you want to be with that. The only thing big coming up in the pipeline is the Fight Finder Files has a new investigation that I very briefly touched on, and I'll very briefly touch on it again. It's about a person that claims to be a mixed martial artist with a record and fights and destinations and results and video footage, that I'll just drop it. They aren't a real human being. So
they're not a real human being even. Oh shit.
So wait for that. When you're going to see that dropping on on the FF Files on Sherdog.com sometime real soon.
I love it. I want to get a Sean Sheehan page, just no forever. With the Ireland flag, and it just be like this. Super heavyweight. We'll go for that. All right, Jay. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and we'll see you all next time. Good luck.